Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spinning Back Click, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take you on a quick fire spin through the week's big talking points in the crazy world of MMA. I'm Simon Head from MMA Junkie, and this week I'm joined by three of MMA Junkie's finest. Checking in from Toronto, Canada, it's MMA Junkie's Mike Bond, and from the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas, we have MMA Junkie Radio's own Gorgeous George and Goes. We've got a lot on the slate this week, so let's get things started. And we simply have to kick things off with the controversial goings-on at UFC on ESPN 14 on Saturday night, where it all got a little bit heated between UFC fight analyst Dan Hardy and referee Herb Dean after Francisco Trinaldo's third-round TKO finish of debutant Jai Herbert. Hardy was clearly livid at what he felt was an egregious late stoppage, but Dean has since come out and defended his handling of the fight, saying that there was no late stoppage involved. It sparked a lot of debate online with fans seemingly split on the topic. What I want to know is, what about you guys? Whose side are you on in this situation? Are you Team Herb Dean or Team Dan Hardy? I'm really interested to hear your takes on this one. So we've got 3 minutes on the clock for this. Mike, you can kick us off.
I'm not really on team anyone, to be honest. I think they're both kind of in the wrong here. I think it was a bad stoppage by Herb Dean. I don't really think that's justifiable saying it wasn't. I thought his comments, addressing part of it was, good to share that insight. And obviously I wasn't the one in there, so I don't know for a fact exactly what he saw, but I don't really know how you defend that stoppage too much. And then Dan Hardy was out of place as well. I don't think it was his right to, start communicating with Herb Dean after the fight. We've seen commentators yell out, stop the fight before. Joe Rogan's done that many times, so it's not really like that's uncommon practice, but it was just emphasized more because we had an empty arena. There's no crowd. You could hear it very, very clearly on the broadcast. So that brings up all sorts of other questions about should they have the commentators cage side still in these pandemic era events. So there's a lot of layers to this, but man, I think, Herb Dean, not his best moment with that stoppage, and Dan Hardy, I think, was a little out of place doing what he did and getting that verbal exchange. So I think they're both in the wrong here.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. George, who do you think was more at fault in this one?
Dan Hardy, slightly, because I think for it to escalate, it didn't need to get there. Like Mike pointed out, this is just an unusual time where everything can be heard within the arena, and all kinds of fans and trainers and everybody else that's watching a fight has that type of reaction. Some are in the back of the locker room, some are front row, some are up in the peanut gallery, and usually the refs really can't hear that, and that's why there's usually communication with officials, and they eventually get to the towel stage. But look, I gotta trust that Herb Dean, after all the thousands of matches that he's called, the years that he's invested in the sport, all the knowledge that he has, and even the times where they congregate and they review their work constantly, those guys know what they're doing. And if that's how Herb Dean saw it, then I'm good with it. There was probably a punch at the end that I didn't like, I suppose, but all this is happening so fast, and I had to go through like 5 or 6 rewinds to go, well, no, could he have done this? Could he have done, all this is happening really, really fast. And I side with Herb Dean here.
Okay, Goes, what do you make of it?
I think I'm going to have to go Team Herb Dean on this one, guys. My opinion of what happened the night of and after watching it really didn't change that much. It was a brutal punch. The guy went down, Herbert went down. But the first thing he did was put his knee up and his hand up, and I think that tells everybody he's aware of what's going on. He didn't go completely flat or anything like that. So if the way you go down in a fight is the decider of how that fight's going to end, then, Scott Smith's career would have been a lot shorter than what it was, or the Congo Berry fight would have went completely different. Could you have maybe stopped it a little bit sooner? Yeah, maybe. But just Dan Hardy, I applaud him for his passion and everything he's doing, but it's just not his spot to do that at that moment. He has to separate himself from being a fighter and a commentator, and it just creates havoc if you do that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, my side on this is I think they're both kind of in the wrong. I think the stoppage was late. I think Dan probably ended up becoming more of a factor in it than I think even he would have liked. But I mean, give me an early stoppage every single time over a late one. And if someone's been a little overzealous on the microphone and has been overheard, I'd rather take that than a guy taking too many shots on the ground. But it's a really tricky one to pick through. And the UFC will do that, as I understand, when they get back to Las Vegas this week. Right, moving on. Former UFC middleweight champion Robert Whittaker bounced back from his title defeat to Israel Adesanya. as he returned from a 9-month layoff to outpoint Darren Till in Saturday night's main event in Abu Dhabi. He called his performance championship level. But what did you make of his display? And do you think Bobby Knuckles will eventually go on to recapture that 185-pound strap? We'll put 3 more minutes on the clock for this, guys. George, you can lead us off.
Well, the fact that he's been a champion leads me to believe that obviously he can get back there, but the guy that holds the title right now is the guy that made it look easy when they fought and took the title from him. Plus, this division has some killers out there. And the one thing about Bobby Knuckles is if you look at his middleweight record, it's pretty amazing, actually. But in a lot of those fights, he gets rocked. And there's some killers out there, for one, starting with the champ himself. Should he lose to Costa? I mean, it's probably going to be because of Costa's violence, his power. Jared Cannonier is on the mend. He's going to be back sometime late this year. He's obviously been throwing some haymakers. Edmund Shabazian, he fights this weekend. I'm sure he's going to try and make a splash as well. So it's going to be tough, but he is that material. This fight didn't proclaim him that. He became that when he became the world champion. Can he get back? I suppose there's a chance because he still has some youth on his side. As long as the body holds up and as long as he stays strong up here, it seems like he's had like a love for the sport, and that's where he's been in and out of it. But my what should have been a short answer is just yes, I think he is championship material.
Goes, it was a really sort of tight tactical matchup. Did you see enough in that performance to suggest that he can get back to the belt one day?
I think everything before that tells us that he could get back to the belt. That before, I mean, here's the problem: that Darren Till fight. It's such an awkward fight for him. I don't know that we saw a really good representation of who he has become since his loss to Israel Adesanya. I think he had to fight that particular way. And I don't know that we would see him fight other fights in that manner. So right now at the top, I mean, Israel Adesanya, his hands are full. We don't know what's going to come out of that. But Robert Whittaker has shown that he can do these types of things. He can give people problems. But I like what George said. There have been moments where he's had trouble, even in victories. The question is, I think he can make it back into form and all that, but I think it's going to be some time because I think there's going to be a lot going on at the top.
Yeah, there's a lot going on at 185, and Darren Till wants to be in the mix, Mike. It was only his second fight at 185 pounds, and he believes his day will come. Do you think he's got it in him to bounce back and one day capture UFC gold?
I think it's very possible. I hope that this knee injury he says he suffered from the stomp isn't anything that, causes long-term issues, anything like that. But I think if Darren Till has proved one thing, it's that he is an elite fighter. I mean, how many guys can we talk about that were championship contenders, top 3, top 5 in one weight class, then move up and translate pretty easily there? I mean, he's right there as a middleweight again. I mean, I know he lost this fight, but I think even in defeat, he very much proves that he's on the upper tier of that weight class, and I wouldn't put it past him to be able to get a championship fight at some point down the line. Still only 27 years old, loads of potential. I don't think we've even seen the peak of Darren Till at this point. So, man, it's going to be a tough climb to get over like those top 2 or 3 at middleweight. Israel Adesanya is looking unreal, but I think Darren Till will definitely see himself in a title fight, maybe champion one day.
Yeah, I mean, he's still very young in the Brit's career as well. Someone else who's very young in his career is Swedish grappling sensation Khamzat Chimaev, who was the talk of UFC Fight Island this past week after registering 2 stoppage wins in the space of just 10 days. Now the super confident Chimaev wants to mix it up with some of the division's best at 170, vowing to smash them all. He even called out Damian Maia this week and challenged the Brazilian to see who has the better grappling at 170 pounds. Big call out, that one. So my big question to you guys is this. Are you aboard the Chimaev hype train already? And do you think he has the grappling skills to defeat someone like Maia so early in his UFC career? We'll put 2 minutes on the clock for this one. Goes, you can lead us off.
I'm definitely on the train, but here's the thing. I'm not really hitting that whistle, and I'm not trying to go full speed ahead. I think he's the real deal, but he needs some time. I think he needs to mess around with some of these guys before he can get to the top contenders because he's got a lot of promise, but there's no sense in rushing him, especially in this COVID-19 era. I think he needs a break. I think he needs time to get a little better. As far as Damian Maia goes, that's a great fight, and that's a very tough fight. I don't know if he's ready for it right now. And the last thing is we know Damian Maia doesn't have much time. And if I'm going to see Damian Maia's last fight, it needs to be in front of a crowd. It needs to be in Brazil. I think he's earned that.
That's a great shout. Mike, what do you reckon? Where'd you put him next in the division?
Yeah, well, let's leave poor Damian Maia alone, man. He's like 43 years old. He doesn't need to be fighting this young killer right now. But I think this guy, all the potential in the world, obviously. I mean, I don't think these two opponents, all respect to John Phillips, Reese McKee, are the best gauge of exactly how good he can be. But I think his performances against them really are. I mean, he shut out McKee on total strikes. I think only took like 2 strikes against Phillips. So he's got a lot of potential there. I hope they don't rush him too quickly. It sounds like they're going to try to turn him around again in late August, maybe early September. I'm interested to see what type of opponent he gets. But right now, I think it's more just about building up experience, building up wins. I think it'll be an interesting future for him.
What do you reckon, George? Who do you want to see him with next?
Well, not Maia. I agree with that because it wouldn't really be like them testing their grappling against each other because strikes are allowed. Would I love to see them, at Chael Sonnen's event or in Abu Dhabi for, they're actually grappling championships? Yes, I would like to see that. But involving strikes, it's a whole different dynamic, whole different sport. I think Maia deserves a fight in Brazil when the crowds are back, like Goz said. And then with Chimaev, I wouldn't rush him back. But, man, he seems so eager, and that just seems to be his deal. So just be careful with the matchmaking is all I'm saying. There's no need to rush this guy, but he is a future contender.
Yeah, he certainly looks like the real deal at 170 pounds. Also on Saturday night, we saw a ton of call-outs, and one of the most interesting came from Fabricio Werdum, the former UFC champion, has beaten the who's who of heavyweight greats over the years, including the last emperor, Fedor Emelianenko. And after his victory over Alexander Gustafsson this weekend, Vi Cavallo said he wanted to face Fedor one more time. Does this mean the heavyweight free agent is a lock to join Bellator now? Or do you think there's a better landing spot for him somewhere else? And is that Fedor fight a matchup that you'd be excited to see some 10 years removed from their first meeting? 2 more minutes on the clock for this one. Mike, you can go first.
I don't think it's 100% a lock that Werdum does leave the UFC. I think there's an outside chance he sticks around, but he seems to be still pretty disgruntled about the whole USADA situation and everything he had to deal with there. So maybe he does depart, and I think if he goes elsewhere, it'll either be one championship or Bellator, with Bellator probably being the front runner just because they have, I think, the bigger heavyweight names, the fights that are more logical. And as you said, the Fedor rematch, which he seems to be very keen on. I mean, he said it bluntly. He'd love to be Fedor's or one of his final opponents in Russia, something like that, do that rematch. So I think the most logical and kind of winnable fights for Werdum at this point are in Bellator. If it's in the UFC, it's going to be a lot tougher matchup. So I think that's ultimately where he lands.
George, is that a fight that you'd pay to see again?
Yeah, of course. If you're saying headlining some pay-per-view somewhere, if the rest of the card's okay, yeah, you got my money. It was epic. It was epic when it happened the first time, honestly. Gave him his first loss. But listen, I always envision – that guy's so charismatic. I always envision him staying with the UFC and kind of having some sort of an ambassador role, kind of like how Nogueira had. He speaks the 3 languages very well. He's done some commentating. So I wanted to see him finish out his career, but maybe the writing's on the wall. Maybe there's just a big payday waiting for him. But I would have liked to hear him say, I'm coming after you, Ryan Bader, and Fedor, watch out. Something that just shows me he wants to still acquire belts and add to the legacy.
Yeah, it looks like they've got a bit of a legends roster going over there in Bellator in the heavyweight division. Does he slot in quite nicely there? And how far can he go if he moves across, guys?
Yeah, I actually think he does fit in kind of nicely there. He is a SoCal guy. He can help sell tickets. They have a lot of SoCal events. The heavyweight division's pretty good over there. It's not bad. So I could see it happening. I could see him being there. Bellator has a great relationship with Ryzen. So we know Fabricio Werdum cut his teeth in Pride over in Japan. So maybe there's possibilities that he can have fights over there. I think it's a decent fit, but I'm kind of with Mike. I think he should stay with the UFC.
Be interesting to see where Fabricio Werdum ends up in a few months' time. And finally, speaking of Bellator, guys, they were back in action this weekend with Bellator 242 marking their long-awaited emergence from the COVID-19 lockdown. It was only a 7-fight card, but there were some important victories on the night. So to round things off this week, whose performance excited you the most on Friday night at Mohegan Sun? And what did you make of Bellator's first show back? We'll put 2 more minutes on the clock to round this off. George, kick us off.
All right, well, I'll make it quick here. Aaron Pico is the one that impressed me the most. And I still believe that even with the setbacks of the KOs that he's had, that guy's a beast, man. He's just well put together, has good hands, good wrestling, and that mindset. As far as their splash back, I wanted a little bit more, like the UFC when they came strong with their 3, title fights. I wanted something like that. Look, this is a promotion that's got 2 champs, and they got a $1 million Grand Prix that needs to be settled. I would have wanted to see something like that, but it could be that they just got a green light from Mohegan Sun and they had to go. So maybe that's the hand they were dealt.
Well, they got that first tricky one out of the way, so hopefully we'll be off and running with plenty more coming down the pipe. Goes, how excited are you to see Bellator back up and running?
I was really excited, and I got to give them props. I mean, they took a different route. They waited a little bit longer, and I think waiting might have helped because they were able to capitalize off of what other sports leagues have done, what the UFC has done, and been able to see that. So I'm really happy to see them back, and it's just hard not to say the name Aaron Pico because the way he performed is what we've all heard from other fighters and coaches. This is the guy. This is the future. He actually looked like that night. So him and Sergio Pettis just seems like he's got so much room to grow under Bellator, under his own name. So I think it's a good fit.
Mike, who's your standout man?
I think it's got to be Pettis. Obviously, Aaron Pico looked good and everything, but I don't think his opponent was anything to write home about necessarily in there, as opposed to Pettis, who's fighting Ricky Mendez, who's a little bit more of a proven commodity. So, yeah, I think, like Go said, I think Pettis is kind of a perfect fit with Bellator, honestly. I think that's going to be a good relationship there. They tried to put a title fight on this card between Juan Archuleta, Patrick Mix. Didn't end up unfolding. I agree with George. I think we would have all liked to see a little bit of a bigger show here, but they have events coming up every 2 weeks for the next a month and a half or so. So I think we're going to see these big names, the Cyborgs, the Ryan Baders, etc., fighting in Bellator pretty soon here in these upcoming events.
Yeah, it's great to have Bellator back up and running again at the Mohegan Sun. I can't wait to see them get those big fights back up and running and get that featherweight tournament back into gear. But all of that is for another day. Coming up this weekend, One Championship returns to action in Bangkok on Friday, and the UFC swaps Fight Island for Sin City as they return to the UFC Apex on Saturday night as middleweights Derek Brunson and Edmund Shabazian face off in the night's main event. That's all we've got for you on this week's episode of Spinning Back Click. Huge thank you to Mike Bond for checking in from Toronto, and to Gorgeous George and Goes for holding things down over there in Las Vegas. Keep it locked to MMA Junkie all week this week for full coverage ahead of Fight Night in Vegas. And be sure to come back and join us next week as we wrap it all up for you on Spinning Back Click.
Hey sports fans, if you want to see more videos like this, check out some of our other ones right here. And if you like what you see, hit the subscribe button and stick around for more from USA Today Sports.